The Art of Flow.
Welcome to The Art of Flow, a podcast that explores connecting with your body, mind, and soul via movement arts and creative exploration. Through conversations with movement artists, circus performers, flow artists, and fire dancers. My name is Morgan Dalgano, and I'm the creator and host of the podcast, a flow arts enthusiast and a life coach. Feel free to check out some of my other work with individuals looking to get unstuck and discover peace and energy at ignitevibrancy.com. And occasionally, I will bring coaching concepts into the artistic dialogues. The Art of Flow is a free public resource for creators, teachers, and supporters of the arts who are interested in flow arts and fire dancing. It is available for mainstream distribution on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, YouTube, Stitcher, and at theartofflowpodcast.com. If you believe in a show that provides inspiration for artists and conversations on the creative process, please support the podcast on Patreon to keep it going. As a supporter, you can earn early access full-length interviews, submit questions for interviewees, be mentioned in an episode, and get a behind-the-scenes look at how the podcast is made. That's The Art of Flow if you're searching for it online. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook to receive shorter clips of episodes, updates, and notifications when new episodes are released. Welcome to the show, Krystin Railing. She is a classically trained dancer and professionally trained circus performer, and has performed across the United States and internationally as a professional juggler and hula hooper. Performing hula hoops since 2009, she has appeared at Seaport Village Buskers Festival, the Fringe Festival, the House of Blues, and on a Norwegian Cruise Lines, among other venues. She has been featured on numerous news programs, late-night talk shows, magazines, newspapers, and blogs for her incredible skills. In other words, she knows the circus and performance world inside and out, and people are talking about her flow. In addition to her performance experience, she was the communications director for the International Jugglers Association in 2019 and is a certified firewalking instructor and empowerment coach through the Firewalking Center. Currently, Krystin is the founder of the Performer's Guide, a business coaching and mentorship program that, in my humble opinion, is truly transformational for artists and art-centered businesses. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, we are so excited to get to delve in deep with you a little bit more about business in the flow arts today. But we want to know, how did you get into the flow arts, circus, and performing?
So I was actually born into the performance genre. I grew up as the niece of a Ringling Brothers juggler. He was a touring juggler. And I spent my childhood from 5 on as a classically trained dancer doing tap, jazz, and ballet, and pretty much spent most of my childhood touring around different state fairs, festivals, and dance competitions as a dancer. And then through that, I actually went to college for small business management and theater production because I thought that I wanted to open up a dance school. But then in the time, it was about 2009, when I was ready to start a business, I realized that opening up a brick and mortar business was not the best decision at that time. And so instead of starting a dance studio, I was a dance instructor teaching around at different studios. And through that, I found the circus arts and was able to trade teaching dance for learning circus skills and being paid to teach dance. And then it kind of just snowballed into me learning hula hooping, fire dancing, and then I found the flow arts and I just fell in love.
That's so interesting. So you were a performance baby. It was in your life constantly, and it's evolved as you've grown and matured yourself. Your interests have, expanded and multiplied.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. When I started Circus Mafia, I didn't even juggle or stilt walk. I only hula hooped and was really a dancer who saw a need for my other circus performer friends who needed help being booked for gigs or managed or just needed help. And so starting Circus Mafia actually came from just seeing a need for my friends needing help and then helping booking them. And then through that, I learned so many more skills of circus and flow art. So I think that's like kind of one big takeaway, like from the beginning, I would say is that you can grow into the skills that you want to perform.
Can you take us a little bit through that journey of expanding skills as you added more things beyond hula hooping? When did you start hooping? What did you pick up? What inspired you?
Great, yeah. So, little known fact: most people think that my first flow arts prop was hula hooping because that's my niche and probably what I'm most well known for. But my first prop was actually poi that I learned. Yeah, I know. I learned it when I was 10 as a hula dancer, and as part of hula lessons, we learned poi. And so I actually did poi first, and then I learned staff when I was in high school. I had a boyfriend who was into martial arts. And so, as part of our date nights, we would do martial arts training. And so, I actually learned a lot of bow staff in high school and college. And then it wasn't until, like 2007 that I found hula hooping. And I was honestly, it was a flow jam, and I was hosting flow jams in Ocean Beach. And through that, we were just, at a jam, and somebody walked by and said, "Hey, where's your tip jar?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking about, a tip jar?" And they were like, "Because you're performing, and we're gonna give you money for it." And didn't even know about busking really. I'd seen a busker, but wasn't something that I thought that I could do. It was just like something I had seen, and it kind of literally accidentally happened. Someone was like, "Here, take my money," and so I was like, "Oh, okay, this is something that I can do." And so through that, I started laying out a tip jar during our trainings and our jams, and through that became a street performer. And then kind of just literally learned how I started on the street. And then through that, someone was like, "Oh, do you have a business card?" And I was like, "No, I don't." So I went and got a business card. And then someone was like, "Oh, I want to book you for my children's birthday party," And so I did that. And then I founded Circus Mafia with a group of people. And it was just very organic in the way that it came out. And then somebody wrote a check to Circus Mafia and they were like, I was like, "Oh, this isn't a real business. This is just a fun name we came up with." And it was through, really, it just all kind of led in on itself that I now had this check that I needed to cash. And the client kind of saw that and they were like, "I'm not going to rewrite the check. You're going to use this as an excuse to start a business." And so I was like 25 and I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm going to start a business," And so it really just snowballed from just kind of organically at a jam to street performing to doing a gig to starting a business. And then people would call me and go, "Oh, I would like your service and something else that I didn't do." And so, like, "Oh, I have friends that do that." And it really just sort of happened organically. And then I kind of just let people know that it was a service available.
People talk about flow as movement arts in our world, but the interesting thing is flow can be present in everything we do in life and a state of mind. And it sounds like by, you know, following your passions and your interests, it took you into this business flow naturally. The snowball effect happened and the tip jar became the performance gives, which became that check, which became a business. It's
Yeah, no,
fascinating.
it's so true. And I love how you, brought this up that we're in the flow arts. And I love your podcast because it's the art of flow. And, I moderate the business of flow arts, but there's the flow of business as well. And I just think that oftentimes people think of them as separate: flow, business, or I'm in a state of flow, or I'm doing business. But oftentimes people ask me like, "Oh, what's your favorite prop, or what are you most known for? And I'm like, it's actually managing. It's doing the computer work. It's the back end bit for me that I truly find my flow. And I find that I'm like really in my flow state when I'm able to work on my business for many hours, and it just feels like effortless because I know that I'm in my life's path, and it just is very flowing right now.
That's wonderful to hear. It's also really unique because I feel like there's sometimes this fear when it comes to performers of merging their art with business. And I hear you speaking so strongly, both here and online. And you have this resource, the Performer's Guide. It's an entire program for artists and art based businesses to embrace the business aspect in their projects. And I just hear you like confidently speaking into this is part of my art.
I think that what's really important for people to think of is that your business is an extension of who you are. And so, and oftentimes people think like, oh, I'm going to start a business and it's going to be this thing outside of me. But what I find to be the most successful is where it's defined within me, and then it's just an extension of something that I'm already doing. And so that's what I'm really trying to do with my clients as well, is really just find what it is they're naturally doing, who it is they naturally are. And then instead of marketing your business, it's creating really valuable relationships with people where everybody's mutually beneficial. And then everyone's just kind of taking that next step up together.
And when did you conceive of this idea of working with clients on their businesses?
Okay, so it's actually really interesting. People always ask me, how does the Performers Guide get started? And so it's like really thinking about it. And I managed Circus Mafia for 10 years. And so I had 100 performers on 4 different continents, flying to different continents and managing their careers. And so through that, I got asked a lot of questions all the time. And then somehow, not somehow, but because I would just answer questions freely, I quickly became known as a go-to source for answering questions. And so I was sort of selfish in that I don't like repeating the same thing over and over too much. And so anytime someone would ask me a question, I would just be like, hold on, and I'd type it over here, and then I'd hand it to them. And then every time the same question would be answered, I would just go back to that document and then just add a little bit more. And I only put as much effort into the amount of times the question was asked. And I didn't even do that with any like plan. It was just, oh, it was happening. And then one day I was literally in the process of selling my business, Circus Mafia, and leaving the flow arts festival management scene. And there was a hole. Yeah.
Caveat here. We're going to go into a little bit more into the festival scene later on, but
Yeah.
tagging that, there'll be more it came from, but it is a grind. There's a lot that goes into festival scene. If you want more information about this, check out an episode with Kevin Axel where we talk about the Fire Arts Institute, where we talk about fire drones, and you can find out more information about what goes into festivals there.
Yeah, so I was really well known for managing these festivals, and so I was leaving my business, and at the same time moving. And there was a point where I was like, okay, I need to create something new or get a job. And there was a bunch of people kind of on the sidelines that were like, uh-oh, what are you gonna do now? You better get a job. And I was just like, that's not within me in any way. Like, I'm not a person who has a job. I'm an entrepreneur. Just, I love creating things from nothing. And so I just sat in deep reflection and I was like, no, there's got to be something that I can do. And I realized that I follow where there's a need, right? Like, I started Circus Mafia because my friends needed managing, but now they were all kind of doing their own thing. They're all surpassing me, you know what I mean? And starting their own businesses. And I was like, okay, what the world needs isn't another agent, isn't another performer. isn't another manager. We need to get all of this information together in a cohesive way so that we can have more performers, we can have more managers and agents, but playing on the same playing field, right? Because so then I looked and I went back to these documents and I was like, oh, wow, I had over 50 articles written and over 200 pages when I put it together. And I was like, oh, I've got a book. Like, I'm going to write a book. So that's actually what the Performer's Guide was going to be, was a book. And so I was like, ooh, I should get some feedback from people before I write a book. So I asked 10 people, who's got questions? I'll answer them. And it really just snowballed from there. Like in one day I had 10 clients, and then in 3 months I had 75 clients for the Performer's Guide. It was insane.
Wow.
And all of my mentors, all of the people around me were like, how can you sustain that? And I couldn't. It was a lot. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing group coaching. And it really came organically. I just put out a post. I had 1, 10, 75. It wasn't sustainable. I made a group coaching program. And then I had all these documents. And then over the course of the past year and a half, I've like really organized it in a way where I go, okay, I see now very clearly what the steps are. And I can jump when someone comes in and they're like, oh, this is my issue. I go, oh, okay, it's actually a mindset problem, or actually it's your finances, or, and I'm able to just
Quickly assess, like see
quickly
what they
assess
need.
and direct people. Yeah. And so that's how the Performer's Guide came about. And it's been so fun. Yeah,
That's
it's just been really
awesome.
great.
So I'm hearing that the Performer's Guide right now not only is a library of resources, but is private mentorship. It's also an academy. It's where you can get like group courses or group classes to share the experience of learning with
Yeah.
other people. And also, do you have something called mastermind mentorship? What's that?
Yeah, so that's actually going to be launched publicly in January, as well as the Academy. So this is actually a really perfect time to talk about it. Basically, what I've been doing for the past year is just overview of everything. And I realized there's actually 12 different individual courses that I've created that could even be more expanded. And so what I'm doing is I'm launching the Performers Academy. And so someone can go through a 12-week program with me and learn the basics of everything you need to know. And from there, you should be able to go on your way and have a functioning, successful business. And then there's other people who still want more feedback, more mentorship. And a lot of it is emotional support as well. And so after you go through the program, many people are like, I want more. And so then we just go into a monthly mentorship where I have my mastermind clients and we deep dive into their specific business while also getting personalized mentorship. And we do one-on-one calls, and then they get access to all the courses that I'm about to launch in January, which is, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of really amazing courses that I've been working on for the past 2 years. And I'm pretty excited to launch them for you all.
I'm so excited to see what comes out and good luck on the launch. I'm curious to know when you're creating a new business course, when you're creating an academy, and everything that you've put out there as resources, you're going through your own previous knowledge and also others individuals resources and documents and like information that's out there but's been temporary because of the way that it's been released. Maybe it's been
Yeah.
in videos, it's been in blogs that get lost in the chatter of the internet. What are 3 pieces of knowledge you've learned that surprised you and stick out?
So first and foremost, the thing that I think is most surprising for me is how much people are willing to give back to me because I'm so open with my information. And so because I've dropped the barrier of access or entry, and I'm just 100% open book, truthful answers, when I then go, hey, can I ask you about this specialized thing that nobody really has access to getting information from? People will quickly go, this is who you talk to, this is how you do it. And I'm able to just snowball the information. And it really is just like rippling. And I'm like, wow, there's all the information is already there. And if I'm willing to share it, people are willing to give it. And so that's one really big thing that I've just been really shocked with, is just how open people are with sharing their information as well. Two is that the information's already out there. I am not reinventing the wheel here. Nothing that I'm writing is my opinion or is made up. It's all stuff that I've already found. And so that was kind of the biggest thing for me. It's like, wait, why are we going backwards in some of this knowledge when it's all already there? And it's because it just takes so much of the digging. And so I was like, wait, I'm already doing that. Why don't I just do it and then represent it in a way that is a little bit easier and for our niche as well. And then the third is, again, speaking of our niche, is looking outside of our businesses, outside of our niche festivals, performers. You want to look at businesses that are really successful. Look at $1 million businesses. Look at businesses outside of our industry to see what's successful. And that's where I'm pulling a lot of my information as well. And I think that for some reason, there's some sort of mental barrier for the Flow Arts Institute where it's like, we get to hear, and then there's the mainstream, and like, those are different businesses. But it's like, I'm trying to blend that so that flow artists can have $1 million businesses, you know, and that it doesn't have to have this separation. So look at other businesses, know that the information's out there, and know that if you share your information freely, that you'll get more information as well.
Solid advice. So I'm hearing, really look around, see what's out there beyond your niche. Really look at what is already in existence. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, you can add your own flair and style to everything, but there are building blocks to choose from. And also, quick caveat, I'm noticing that I've asked a lot of questions of Krystin about the performer's guide and what she's currently doing and creating. And that's because she's so passionate about what is going on in her life. But I want to also offer to listeners some advice, maybe some things they've been wondering about, such as finances. Ooh, everyone's favorite topic, right?
Ooh, this is actually one of my favorite topics. And I would say that my article, Pricing Yourself Like a Pro, is the #1 read article that I've written. And it was the first one that I published and is by far the #1 most shared and reshared article that I've written. And whoo, we got the starving artist mindset, don't we? I think a lot of people are, and especially right now, we're struggling. We're not having the easiest time with our finances, right? And so a lot of times we're trying to look to each other like, help, what are you doing? What's the industry standard? What should I be doing? All while getting the supposed backlash of undercutting, underbidding, and everyone's trying to uphold the standards while at the same time not knowing what those standards are or how to actually figure out their own finances for themselves. And what ends up happening is what I call the cheat sheet method, where performers go, what are you charging? Okay, that's what I charge, or I make a rate and then someone else goes, no, that's how we're supposed to be charging. It's like, this is the cheat sheet, this is what we're all looking at. And it's a top-down method, right? It's looking at a number and then trying to cram your services into that number. And then at the end going, that didn't work, and then it's happening over and over and over again. And then people aren't financially sustaining their art, right? And so what you got to do is a bottom up approach. What are my finances? What's my income currently? What are my expenses, bills, everything? What am I spending monthly? Okay, that's what I need. how much am I willing to work a month? And then you just do math and you divide it. And then that's how you find your rate for your finances. And when I do the math with people, sometimes people are actually pretty spot on with their rates, but a lot of times people go, wow, I felt so uncomfortable asking for $500 or asking for $1,000. But when I do the math in this way, then I feel comfortable presenting these numbers, right? And so that's really one of my biggest things that I'm trying to help my clients, and really just people who message me and ask is, how do I figure out what my finances are? How do I use that to create my price rate? And then how do I justify those rates to the clients? Because when I'm talking to my clients, they're not haggling me on the rate because it's really well laid out. They're just haggling me on their ability to afford it, you know? And so that's where I want to get people to realize that we can charge a wide variety of rates at any time to anybody, but we just have to make sure that it's energetically and ethically in alignment for the long term so that it can sustain. And I always say no one else should tell you what you should be charging. Your lack of ability to pay your bills will tell you that, you know? So
That's a good indicator.
yeah.
And you mentioned energetically and ethically. I'm curious to know, do you have a personal code of ethics that you follow, or something that indicates for yourself when it comes to your personal finances, how to go about this process?
So, I mean, the entire business process is really about creating um, connections that are in ethical alignment with who you are as a person, right? And so oftentimes people are like, I want to get more clients, you know, and it's called client relationships, but they forget about the relationship part. And so first you have to go inside and go, okay, who am I? What do I stand for? And then you find people in alignment with that. And once you do, finances just flow naturally. But when you're out of alignment, you lose everything, you know? And I felt that. That happened to me last year. I went out of alignment, and you lose clients, you lose friends, you lose energy, and you realize like something's not sustaining me here. What is it? And you have to constantly, it's a balance game, right? You're like constantly doing this, and you have to like
The
find your
seesaw.
moral compass essentially, right? And the moral compass is the financial compass, is the business compass, and it's all tied together.
Yeah, I hear you mentioning kind of the seesaw effect, this like teeter totter to find where, like, almost if you're like actually riding a wave, you're surfing and you're trying to figure out where are the ebbs and flows, and are you on a dip or are you on a high? Like, where's the crest? You have to be aware of your surroundings in that regard.
Yeah, and really everything is when you break it down, everything's a wave, right? We go back to physics, everything's a wave. And the same is true in business. You have highs and lows, and internal, external. And I think a lot of times people just see the business as this, like I'm growing as a business. But when you talk to each individual flow artist who is successful, like for them, it feels like this, you know, and there's the classic success looks like this, you know, you think it looks like this, but it doesn't. And so really it is just about riding that wave and like figuring out when you're out and come back, you know, and there's no like my business is finished. It's always a balancing game.
How do you get creative when designing a business plan and finding funding for your own business?
Okay. So I don't think I'm very creative when it comes to my business plans or funding. Like I think where the success lies is in the fact that it's a system. I have an outline, it has questions, and I answer them, and I use that system over and over to create new businesses. And the same with uh, getting funding. It's not this ethereal, like, wow, how did they get funding? They made a goal. They made a list of people who could potentially give that. And then you contact them with a really specific ask. Do you always get it? No, but you get learning experiences from each time, right? And so I think a lot of times is just doing it. And I think funding is another big, like, ethereal one. People think, oh, as a performer, I only get money from I'm trading my time for money. But there's a whole different array of ways we can generate income, not hourly, but exponentially, really.
Can you elaborate on this a little bit, or is this something that you go into further online or in other resources that are already out there?
I'd be happy to share a little bit. I don't go too much into it. But essentially, performers are trading their time for money right now. And time is your most valuable resource. You only have a limited amount of time that you can trade for money. And so this is why I always talk about everything being an energetic exchange. And the energetic exchange we're used to is time for money. Time is energy, money is energy, and we're exchanging that. And so instead of exchanging time for money, I'm trying to help my clients understand that we can trade resources for money. We can trade what's in here for money or for energy. And it doesn't have to be a monetary exchange. It could be an energetic exchange. And I even talk about this in like perks and exposure and the way that people even engage with that. It's all energy, and you just have to figure out the way it sustains you. And that's kind of the basic of it.
I'm hearing to stay connected to your heart and your purpose, really, and understanding what you're putting energy into and where you're getting energy from in your whole process
And
of
it's also like a
performance.
return on investment, right? And you're giving so much time into something, and especially as an artist, you give so much. But then what's the return? If it's not monetary, it has to be an ethical return, And so that's what we want to look at before we say yes to so many projects is what's the energetic return I'm really getting from this?
What advice do you have, if any, for integrating the business side of our lives and the artistic side of our lives?
Okay, so if you become my client, the first activity we do is called the Wheel of Life. I didn't make it up. It's a classic self-help tool. You can look it up you could just literally type in Wheel of Life into Google. And it is a self-help evaluation tool that I love. And it essentially breaks up your life into different categories, like a wheel. So think of like a cheese slice or pizza, right? It's cut into different slices. That's your life. And then you break it up into business, finances, personal, however you want. There's no right or wrong. But people like to think of their business and their life as like these two separate entities, but it's not. It's all one wheel that is connected. And if you don't have good finances or a lumpy business plan, or you're a mental mess, like your wheel gets lumpy, right? And then what should be like rolling along business, something will hit and you're like, roll along something, right? And what is that for you? For me, for Morgan, it was taxes. For me, classically, finances. Like if people 10 years ago knew that I was teaching stuff on finances, they'd be like, what? You were a financial mess. You know what I mean? But it was through that I learned dedicated time to like figuring out how to be better at that so that I could have a more fully functioning wheel of life, my life, And so for some people, it's personal, finances, business, interpersonal, but there's something that's like holding you back. And that's the thing you got to focus on, because it's like super easy to like only focus on marketing, performing because it's fun and it's easy and you're good at it. But when I first talk to people, it's like, oh, we're not going to be focusing on your marketing for the first 6 months. We're going to be making sure that you can pay your bills. We're going to be making sure you're not having anxiety attacks. We're going to be making sure that you have a business to market, you know? And so just realize it's not your business and your personal, it's everything's together. And your business comes from the inside out. And I talk about this also with your personal branding, right? It's not just putting on a costume. I'm a flow artist, put on a costume, now I'm a performer. No, it comes from the inside. Who are you as a person? And then the costume sort of accentuates that, you know? So do the wheel of life. And once you've done it, come and I'll analyze it with you.
So it sounds like you've learned a lot from your personal experiences with finances and then able to transform that into a wealth of knowledge that you now can share with others. I'm curious to know, in what ways have you done the same process from performance and flow arts? How has it impacted your life physically, mentally, and spiritually?
Ooh, I feel like honestly, the flow arts is my meditation, right? So we talk about spirituality, talk about meditation, getting into the flow, right? Like that is part of it, right? And then doing flow arts led me into firewalking. It led me into personal development. It's led me into all these different avenues that had I just, I don't know, been who I was 15 years ago coming out of college, like I shunned away from performance and dance and flow arts for a good 5 to 10 years of my life. You know, life was traumatic and I was depressed. I was, you know, I mean, life can still be depressing now, but there was like a hole missing in my life. And it was because I had left religion, I had left all these things. And I was like really kind of just re-looking over what society had told me. And I was just felt hollow. And I was like, this isn't right somehow. And it was through just self-expression and finding again, I'm really just realizing everything's like internal to external, right? And so flow arts, you go internal and you just feel and understand, but then at some point you give it back, right? And that's what performing is. Flow arts is the internalization of the feelings in life. And then performing is the externalization of that realization so that you can share it with other people.
And what's the externalization of your process as a performer and a teacher and a mentor feel like?
You know, and that's funny because I'm, you know, I have a group of mentors that I work with, and it's like you think the mentor, you know, somehow I'm above other people, or I think that I'm above other people because I'm mentoring others, right? But really, what it is I'm just a few steps ahead of people, and it's just you're constantly like reaching down to like help the next person up, right? And so everyone's a mentor. I'm just doing it more publicly and I've like embraced it. But when you really think about it, like the next person, I teach them something and then they turn around and they teach it to the next person, you know? And so it's like everything, you know? And especially with creating the performer's guide, it was like giving birth. It was like ecstatic, sadness, like emptiness, is like giving everything away at the same time, building and creation and destruction. It's like everything. It's so weird. It's so everything all at the same time. It's not just like I created a business and this was great. You know, it's like you literally go through, am I doing the right thing? Am I really benefiting people? Like, what am I doing here? And then just you start getting reflections back of like, you just like kind of listen to feedback, you know, and again, you just kind of take your marker like this and you just go, okay, like this is going to be a book. This isn't a book anymore. It's going to have a book element to it. But through really hearing other people, it's become more than what I could have ever done on my own, you know?
So the externalization process is cyclical. It goes back into that internal and rounds in circles so that you're adjusting and you're flowing, you're creating something new, but you're not staying stagnant in what's possible.
Exactly. And it's always, and I find that the most successful businesses are always in a feedback loop. And it's a constant feedback loop. I present and someone gives me feedback. I internalize it. I either accept it or reject it. And then I represent it, you know? And I think a lot of people just get to the feedback part and they go, oh. You know, and it's like, no, take it and then represent it and just over and over. And you just have to have the dedication to hear that wasn't good. You can do better. This wasn't for me. I don't know. You're not going to do it over and over. And even in here and externally, and then just go, no, I'm just going to keep going. And then all of a sudden you just look back and you're like, whoa, that works.
And I'm curious a little bit, before we talked about festivals and the years of experience that you have in festival organization, how did you get involved in that and in the float, your first flow scene?
So I think I'm probably most widely known for my work in festival management. And people are always asking me, how did you get to be in such a pinnacle position? Or how did you get into the scene in this way? And I think that the number, like when I really look back at it, like what's the number one suggestion I can give to somebody? And it's pave your own way. When I found Marvin from Manipulation Festival, they didn't even have an aerial area. Aerials wasn't even a big scene in flow festivals. You had circus and you had flow. And so from the beginning, core value was that these aren't separate. These are like two sides of the same coin. They just don't even know it, that circus and flow arts should be best friends. And so I went in not applying. I didn't fill out an application necessarily. I went in and said, hey, I see a need that needs filling. You don't have an aerial rig here. I can supply that. And so I always talk about people like, how do you do marketing or how do you get in somewhere? And yes, you want to fill out applications. Nobody's above filling out applications. But at some point, you're just going to be a sea of applications that are getting filled in. And so the number one is making deep connections with the people you want to work with. So I made a point to contact Marvin and make a connection with him. And then once you have a connection, you pave your own way and create your own position. That's what I did with Manipulation Festival. That's what I did with Universal Flow Gathering. That's what I did with the Flow Arts Institute. I created the project manager position. That wasn't a position that even existed before me. So that's how I feel like I'm an entrepreneur. I see a need and I fill it. My friends needed management. I created Circus Mafia. Then I realized that they needed help more on the back end and I created the performer's guide. I saw that they needed an aerial rig and I created that. It's like, oh, you guys need help with your projects. I created that position. And so it's called the blue ocean strategy of, in the ocean, sharks, you got a bunch of sharks. That's a red ocean. They're tearing at the same fish. But if you just kind of go over here in a blue ocean, then there's no competition in that market. And it's like, okay, of course you're going to get the gig. And that's exactly what I did with the performer's guide, right? I was in a sea of other people who are now trying to manage and are successfully managing businesses. And I was just like, okay, wait, I'm going to go outside of that and then now help them, And so how can you go from being another applicant in a sea of applications to paving the way in a new endeavor?
That's a really good question. Seeing what is not yet created, what's not yet in existence, but's needed, and stepping up to be that and fill that role. And I know after you worked with Marvin Ong and you got into festival organizing and you're a project manager, you also worked as a director of communications for the International Jugglers Association for a while. What challenges did you face and what were your favorite parts of the position?
So that was a really fun position. I was the interim stand-in communications director for Martin, who has been the communications director for, I mean, pretty much since the beginning. So one was I had really big shoes to fill, and there's a lot of information to learn, right? And so I had my personal challenges with coming into a new role that I knew was temporary. But as an organization as a whole, I got a good deep dive into the back end, and I feel like, and they do it so well still, but their biggest challenge in my mind is that they have a new festival director every single year. They have a new location every single year. And there's so much turnover that the amount of re-education that's needed is extraordinary. And the fact that it is still such a well-organized and well-run organization is honestly mind-blowing to me, because if other organizations ran it in the same way, I don't know if they would be able to be so successful. And it is because they have such a well-oiled machine of people who've been there for 20 years, But then you get sort of on the other side of people who've been there 20 years, and then you get oh, this is the way we've always been doing it, in a time when we're in a rapid change of technological changes, So you have a bunch of old school jugglers running a new organization that's rapidly changing. And so often with the sort of new school jugglers and the old school jugglers are trying to just kind of freshen things up a bit. But I think that even despite all that, it's one of the most organized businesses I've worked with, and I'm very grateful for my time there.
When you pause to think about it, that's extremely impressive. I forget that, they change location every single year. What a headache. I'm curious, you mentioned technological changes. Let's go there. What is your advice for website SEO, search engine optimization, and social media marketing?
Yes, I think this is another big one that people ask me, do I really need a website? Come on, do I really need a website? And I'll say, no, you don't need a website. I traveled the world without one, and you'll be more successful with one. And I always think about this. I'm like, okay, I was on Tribe, I was on AOL, I was on MySpace, Facebook, now Instagram, now TikTok. Now people are getting upset with those, and there's going to be a new thing. You know what's been tried and true this whole time? A website. You had a website 15 years ago, that website's the same that it was, now. And the beauty of owning a website is it's kind of like your own little real estate. And if you have social media, then you're just renting space on someone else's brand. And you can leverage that to be very successful. But there's power and comfort in having complete control of your own little space, right? So I highly suggest having a website. And if you need help building one with WordPress, I am happy to help. And then as far as marketing, right? Social media marketing. I think this is another big one just in general. Marketing. I don't do marketing. I don't even do targeted marketing. I do what's called focusing on my spheres of influence, and I have this really nice diagram. If you think about target market like a target, like a bullseye, people think of the target market as the center point, like that's the goal. But really, you got the market, and then you have the target market, and then you have the community, your friends, your family, your besties. Like you have this whole sphere of people that actually really care about you already, and you don't have to do as much work to work with them. I focus there. That's how I do my social media marketing. If you look at my social media stats, I don't have a lot of followers. I'm not like Circus Mafia had like 7,000, and I'm at like 400 with the Performer's Guide. Like social media is not my game. I don't play that game, but I use it to really generate deep connections with people. And when I look at my social media, I'm like, I would work with these people, and I really like that. And so that's what I would really focus with my social media is, again, core values, really tightening that up, working with really close people, and then the marketing and the target marketing will sort of snowball on its own. But if you're trying to fish way out into the target market, reel that bad boy back in versus doing just shallow fishing with your close circle.
Bringing it back around to your story of how you got more immersed in the flow arts world when you were at jams and people asked you like, oh, how do we give you this money? Are you buskers, right? It's making me think of you're doing your thing, you're doing what's important to you and in the moment, in the flow, and people who are interested in that are going to come. They're going to find you, they're going to join you, they're going to want to offer something in exchange because you're already providing value.
Yeah, and that's really how I do it a lot. Like if you notice with the Performer's Guide, if you follow me at all, I don't really do all that much sales posts. They come in naturally. It's all through word of mouth. And Circus Mafia was the same way. A lot of it came through word of mouth. And so there's a lot of power in having someone else give a suggestion for you than you being like, hey, book me. And so affiliate programs, testimonials, giving people referrals, all this kind of stuff can be really beneficial for a new business.
Moving aside from business for a moment, what's your own creative process for creating stage acts and performances?
Oh, so my course is called Get Your Act Together. And I was actually the original name of the Performer's Guide was Get Your Act Together. And that was the first course that I launched. Even before this was a real program or anything in my mind, I had Get Your Act Together, a stage act creation course that I used to tour around festivals to teach as one of my workshops. And so this is actually one of my favorite topics of how does one go from wanting to be a performer to actually creating the act? And so I actually have an article that's how to create a stage act that really breaks it all down. But something will inspire, right? And so it's either the costume or the prop or a theme or the stage, something. And then you build the elements around it with the other pieces, And so I think that a lot of times people think that there's some A to Z for performing, creating a stage act, but really, again, it's very organic, like something will come and then you create something around that. And then you find the song that fits it, or you work with somebody and then that inspires an idea. But sometimes I'm not inspired at all. And you really have to dig for it. And so when you got to work that way, it's very boring. I just write a sequence list. I list out everything I can do, and I number them, and then I put it in order of 1 to 4, or whatever your numerical quantification is, and then start sequencing them out. And I just have sequences that I know I can do, and then you just sort of piece them together. And then someone's like, oh, I want this. And you're like, okay. And then you just it's like getting dressed, you're like, I have this piece and I got this one, I could do that with this song. And then it slowly solidifies, and then something comes of it. And then you're like, ooh, this is good. You have a lot of shit and you just kind of let that go. And then something good will come and you're like, okay, I'm going to work on this. And most people, I think, overcreate. You want to try to do 1 act a year, really hone it in.
I hear you. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, I have a big question for you. It's one that's been on my mind a lot this year as we've been facing protests across the country. We've been facing global pandemic. We've been facing a lot of challenges globally and nationally. But also that impacts our community. And I'm asking every guest artist on the show, what challenges does the flow arts and spinning community currently face? And what ideas do you have to tackle those challenges, if any?
I think that's just such a good point, first of all, that I really want to address, which is that the flow arts community isn't outside of everything that's happening. That, again, if we talk about the target market into our inner circles, the same thing can be said with the community and then our sub communities, right? And so everything that society is facing as a whole, we as a smaller sect of that feel in smaller ways, right? And so I think one major one is our inability to gather in person currently, right? And so most of our connections have been in person. And so, and most of the flow arts businesses are based on in-person events. And so with the loss of that, we both have a loosening of the community threads, as well as financial disarray, for lack of a better word, that a business model for the performers or for the flow arts, that business model, the festival business model was already very fragile. And there were already conversations about that internally and publicly about how sustainable is the business model for flow arts in the way that it is right now. So you already have a teetering business model amongst a heavily fluctuating market. And what that can cause is either detriment, loss, or some great growth will come from this, right? And so what's happening is the great pivot. Everyone's pivoting, right? And so we're going from having festivals in person to digital festivals. And so that comes with its own challenges of pricing and making sure that's a sustainable business model, but also just like the technical requirements for running these events, right? Like you can't see, but I have a whole studio now to be able to host a workshop, when before I would just go to a festival and be able to teach this workshop. So you have to pivot, you have to find a new market, learn all this new technology, find community still, all within what's happening, while still, maintaining our own personal growth. I see that we are doing it, we're doing it, but that's what I see as the current challenge, right? Technological, community-based, really missing that in-person connection. And I'm curious to see what's going to happen over the next year. My prediction is that it's going to continue like this through next year, and that we won't have large scale festivals until 2022. I'm already seeing, Envision has pulled for 2021, and they're in March. So I think that they're the kind of the leader for the first event of the year, right? So we kind of always look to Envision to see what's happening there. They've pulled. I know that Burning Man had a 2-year pull, so they're not coming back till 2022. I just think we need to expect the best, prepare for the worst. So expect for it to come back, but we need to prepare for this to be a full another year of this, is my prediction. And so I think that's what we're really going to be facing is another year of this, while, with our mindset as well. They just keep feeding the line, like, oh, it's going to be a few months, it'll be a few months. And so I'm seeing people sort of having the breakup again. They're like, it's happening again. So I'm trying to nip that in the bud for people. Just like, let's just prepare for a whole year so we're not breaking our own hearts over and over again.
Looking at the long-term vision and the possibility that this temporary transition to digital spaces for our community and for connection is going to be longer than necessarily being released by the experts in charge, the positive spin on things right now. And I'm also hearing that there's some possibility for this to be a phoenix rising from the ashes type of situation. Like, what's gonna come out of the ruins of what we have known so far up to this point of our ways to connect? What's already emerging? It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited, and I hope personally that we kind of go into this hybrid version of what was and what is now, and that festivals stay online and keep their in-person, because I think that if we do a blend of them, then that could be a sustainable model. You got your in-person, then you have things sustaining throughout the year, and that allows for people to maintain connection throughout the year as opposed to just a singular event. Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities here. I'm excited to see where we'll go with it.
And what is your vision for the future of Florets in the long term?
So my vision is basically kind of that, right? A blend of in-person and digital events. And I'd love to see more entrepreneurs. I'd love to see more people owning their own businesses. I'd love to see more people feeling financially secure and basically getting us out of the starving artist mindset and getting into a financial freedom mindset so that we can all kind of take this next step together, and we can realize that as I rise, you rise, as you rise, they rise, and that we can earn money in an ethically sustainable way, and we can be playing the big game just like everybody else. And so I'd love to see just more successful flow arts businesses.
You heard it here, folks. Krystin's mission is less scarcity mentality when it comes to performance, leaving the competition behind, collaboration, and all of this incorporated into your personal, your internal becoming the external and cycling around. So, Krystin, what do you do when you're not flowing, spinning props, performing, teaching, advising, mentoring, all the good stuff? What's your
Sleeping? No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I'm really well known for my naps. I think that one of the keys to my success to being able to do all of these things is I take a lot of time for myself and a lot of self-care, rest. There's a little known fact, actually, I used to live at the Emerald Village, which is a 9-acre eco village, which is where Manipulation Festival, their first event was. Before they went to Idlewild, it was at the Emerald Village in Vista. And so I lived there for 2 years, and through that and I already had just an avid gardening love. And so I prepped for this interview by gardening for 2 hours this morning. I transplanted some birds of paradise and some aloe, and I'm making this little sunroom right now.
That sounds so beautiful.
Yeah, so I'd say that's kind of like my go-to cathartic release is gardening.
And what else would you like to share with listeners?
You can do it. We can all do it.
Thank you so much, Krystin, for your time today, for sharing your knowledge and your insights and your experience in the flow arts across the years. If anybody has questions or wants to connect with you, how can they reach you?
So you can find me at theperformersguide.com. And if anybody would like to schedule a Q&A with me, I will offer anybody who is listening to this podcast a free Q&A session. And I will send Morgan the link to that, and she can link that up. And I take free calls on Thursdays. I only take 5 a day, so space is limited. But if you have a business or have questions and need anything, I'm here for you. I do operate a business, but I am also available free of charge. First time's free. So I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And folks, if you're looking for that information, go ahead and check the show notes below and you'll find a link right there. Do you want to keep the conversation going? Join the Art of Flow Facebook group to be part of a community discussing the episodes, sharing art, resources, and questions with each other. Thank you for listening and see you next time.